I wanted to talk about how somebody gets cerebral palsy. So I brought my mom along since she was there when I got cerebral palsy. By the way, you don't get it from catching it from somebody else, and it's not really a genetic disorder either. You only get cerebral palsy either before birth, during birth, or shortly after birth. In my case, I got it during my birth, and I'll let my mom explain.
Yeah, the doctor that had checked him for cerebral palsy, who was 2 years old, said that his cerebral palsy was due to his birth history. So it happened while he was in the birthing process. But as it was, I had a very difficult birth with him. It turned out that he was in what's called a posterior position, where his back was turned toward my back. And normally, as anyone might know, the baby's back is turned toward the mother's belly. So, and that way he comes through the birth canal much easier. But when I went into labor, I was in and out of labor for 5 days because he was turned his back to my back, and I was having back pain. And normally when a child is born, in a posterior position, he turns as he's coming out, and he will turn to the right position. In other words, just because he was in the birth canal too long, it made things more difficult for him. He was in the birth canal too long due to a posterior position, so which can cause some lack of oxygen, which could affect his brain to some extent, and cause cerebral palsy. So also the pressure on his head. Whereas if he would have come out normally, he would have been fine. But I understand from things I've heard that if he had been born C-section, he would have been fine. He would have avoided all that trauma. But we were rushed to the hospital in an ambulance after 5 days of discomfort and backaches and that, and I didn't know what was wrong until after he was born. But they had me force him out. To the count of 10, I had to keep pushing until I totally forced him out, and that probably what caused the problem.
Mm-hmm. So I've had cerebral palsy for my entire life because of it.
Yeah, I do have regrets about that. If somebody would have told us that he was in a posterior position, but the doctors didn't even say it. They didn't even check, as far as I know. If we would have known, we could have had the right option. So
they never told you?
No.
They didn't tell you before the birth?
No. They didn't even mention the options.
They just did what they did.
Yeah, they were just trying to get the baby out whatever way they could, and that's... I guess when you think about it, that could be a bad decision on their part, and it was detrimental to his life history, too.
You weren't getting regular checkups at the doctor, or...?
Well, we didn't think anything was wrong. He was a big baby. He was healthy. He was strong. He was enthusiastic. Just the way he is now. And he seemed normal. It wasn't until he was, almost 2 years old that his dad, my husband Gary, discovered that he was extremely right-handed, and he didn't think that was right because I guess babies usually are ambidextrous, and where they can use either hand.
Maybe.
And I was skeptical. I said, nah, he's normal, and because everybody's right-handed, but my husband sensed that he had problems and that it wasn't right, because Gary was pretty sensitive. But so we took him to see someone, a specialist, and he checked him and told him he had cerebral palsy and due to his birth history. So that's we couldn't have found out any sooner than we did.
But somehow my birth had somehow damaged the part of my brain that works with motor functions within the left side. As I say in my previous video, my cerebral palsy just affects my left side, my entire left side. So whatever is damaged is in the right. And thankfully, it didn't damage more of myself. It seems to have mostly damaged the motor function.
Well, they did say that you have mild cerebral palsy.
Yeah, it's considered mild cerebral palsy because I don't need constant care like some people with cerebral palsy do, like with severe cerebral palsy.
His intellect is fine. He can take care of himself pretty much.
Well, a lot of people with cerebral palsy have great intellect. I mean, I remember when I was in school, elementary school, there was this really, there's this kid with cerebral palsy, so he was in his wheelchair, and he could barely use both of his hands, and he was pretty witty. So it usually doesn't affect your mental functionings, but
That's
sometimes
true. I think
sometimes it does. From what I've heard, it does sometimes hinder. The same damage does also hinder the way you think and stuff like that. But I'll probably get into that more in a future video. There are several different things that can cause somebody to have cerebral palsy, one of which being having a difficult birth. But I'm just describing my type of cerebral palsy. So if you want to do more research into it, you can do that.
Well, I personally always thought of him as normal. And I'm just really glad that it wasn't worse than it turned out to be, And as far as him being a baby goes, we didn't even know there was anything wrong with him until a couple of years, for a couple of years. So overall, I've thought of him as normal, and I'm just glad it wasn't worse.
I'm glad it wasn't worse either. Alright, thank you for watching. I know it's been a little bit longer of a wait than I wanted to for this. I recorded this one other time. Tried to record this one other time outside, but too much wind and stuff like that. I'll hopefully get the next one out a lot quicker than this. And I hope this is helpful for people, and I'll see you in the next video.